This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and today is Friday, and that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. I've done a whole lot of MTG Top 10s at this point. I think that's safe to say. This is the 475th MTG Top 10. Because I've been doing them for so long, it's often necessary to go back and update older lists, and that's what we're doing today, with a look at the keyword Vigilance. I originally took a look at Vigilance in May of 2018, so the list is 4 years old at this point, and it should be no surprise that the list has changed significantly in that amount of time. Vigilance is an evergreen keyword, which means we see several cards with it in every single set. A creature with Vigilance doesn't have to tap to attack, so this allows them to play double duty. They can attack and block in most turn cycles. Not tapping to attack is as old as the game of Magic itself, since it appeared in 1993's Alpha, most famously on Serra Angel, but it took more than a decade for the ability to be keyworded, which didn't occur until 2004's Champions of Kamigawa. It appears the most frequently on white cards, but it's also found pretty frequently on green cards. To be eligible for this list, a card had to have Vigilance in the text box. This means that creatures that have Vigilance were of course eligible, as were cards that grant Vigilance, and so forth. In all, there were 574 cards that met this requirement, and in this video, we'll take a look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. In addition to that, we'll also take a look at the 4 cards that made it to the list back in 2018 that are no longer on the 2022 version. Here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points. This includes events like Pro Tours and World Championships. A second tier top 8 is worth 1 point, and this includes events like Grand Prix and Magic Fests. Before we get started talking about the cards in this video, I do want to let you know that channel memberships are now available. You can offer me some additional support and receive cool perks like access to a Discord server and early access to videos, among other things. Click join down below the video for more details. You can of course also still become a patron or subscribe to me on Twitch if you'd like to support me that way. In addition, I've also recently rolled out a little bit of merch for the channel. Right now you have a couple of different shirt options featuring the sweet new logo for the channel. And you can find a link in the description that will take you to the store on Merchland where you can buy them. Alright, let's get started with a look at the cards that are no longer on the 2022 edition of MTG Top 10, Vigilance. First up, there's Selesnia Charm, which was at number 10 last time. Like all charms, this is an instant that gives you 3 options, and modality tends to be pretty nice. The charm can be a combat trick that gives +2/+2 and trample to a creature. It can be a removal spell that can kill creatures with high power, or it can make 2/2 tokens with Vigilance. That last part, obviously, is what made it eligible for this list. All of these options are pretty solid for 2 mana, so having the option between them is nice. While in Standard it was played in Selesnia aggro decks, since the 2018 video it's also gained 2 points in Pioneer and Niv Mizzet decks. However, it definitely isn't gaining points at a very high rate, and while 21 points was enough to make the list last time, it took double that, 42 points this time around, so it isn't very likely the charm ever works its way back onto the list, even if it does gain a few more points here and there in Pioneer. Next up, there's Ajani Goldman, who was at number 9 last time. This Ajani is one of the original 5 Planeswalkers that made their debut in Lorwyn. He comes with a +1 that gains you 2 life, and an ultimate that makes an avatar token with power and toughness each equal to your life total, so basically Serra Avatar. But the part that makes the card eligible for this list is the -1, which puts a +1/+1 counter on each of your creatures and gives them Vigilance. That is definitely the part of Ajani Goldman which makes it the best Magic card, since if you have any board state at all, that's a big upgrade for only 1 loyalty. It was played in a lot of aggro decks in both block and Standard, but it's never gained any points since rotating out of Standard in 2011, so it won't be able to find its way back on this list. Next up, there's Brumas, King of Oreskos, who was at number 8 on the 2018 list. He brings you some above-rate stats as a 3 mana 3/4 with Vigilance, and he comes with the powerful ability to generate Cat Soldier creature tokens, both when he attacks and blocks, and that's a nice way to take advantage of Vigilance. He was played in a pretty wide variety of decks in Standard. This included all-out aggro decks like Boros Aggro, as well as blue-white control decks. He's also gained points in Modern Hate Bear and Legacy Death and Taxes. However, he's only gained a single point since 2018, and it came in a Pioneer White Weenie deck. Brumas has a pretty good track record of multi-format success, but he probably isn't going to be making it back onto the list. He's just too far behind, and he's not gaining points quickly enough. And the last card that made the list in 2018 but didn't this time is Ellisnorn Grand Cenobite. Ellisnorn has an absolutely massive impact on the board since it gives all of your creatures +2/+2, while giving the opposing board -2/2. This can often immediately kill a big chunk of your opponent's board, while also allowing your creatures to attack way more effectively. In Standard, Ellisnorn was one of the ultimate in-goals for Birthing Pod decks as you would move up the chain until you got to Elish. In Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, Ellisnorn has been cheated into play using reanimation spells and Oath of Druids. While Ellisnorn has only gained 5 points since the 2018 list, Elish is pretty likely to keep on gaining points since it's one of the best things to cheat into play in multiple formats. Additionally, some of the cards at the bottom of the top 10 this time around have sort of stalled out, so it isn't out of the question that Ellisnorn can work its way back to the list. Alright, let's see what's on the 2022 edition of MTG Top 10 Vigilance. At number 10, it is History of Banalia, which was only a few weeks old when the 2018 list came out. Like most sagas, the value you get out of this card is pretty impressive when you look at the mana cost, even if you do have to wait a little while to get everything. History of Banalia is all about knights, and for the low investment of 3 mana, you get 2/2/2 tokens with Vigilance, and then all your knights get buffed by Chapter 3. Obviously, Chapter 1 and 2 give you knights, so Chapter 3 will usually have some impact, and this can be especially true if you've played multiple Histories of Banalia. It was pretty heavily played in Standard, appearing in both aggro and control decks, but it hasn't gained any points since rotating out of Standard, and it doesn't look likely that it will be on this list if I revisit it again in 4 years' time. At number 9, it is Elder Gargaroth. It didn't even exist back in 2018, since it was printed in 2020. This is a 5-mana 6/6 that comes with Vigilance, as well as Reach and Trample, and anytime it attacks or blocks, you get a choice between 3 powerful options. You can draw a card, or you can make a beast token, or you can gain life. Obviously, drawing the card or making the beast are usually the most powerful, but sometimes you need that life to stabilize. Combining Vigilance and Reach with that modal ability is great too, because it means that the Gargaroth can attack and block during most turn cycles, and it can also block basically the maximum number of things since it can block flyers. And that means you often get 2 triggers if your opponent's not careful. If the Gargaroth isn't removed straight up, it's going to give its controller at least one of those triggers, and that's pretty much a 2-for-1. If he gets more than a single trigger, he takes over games. Obviously, the Gargaroth has already enjoyed significant multi-format success, gaining points in Standard, Historic, Pioneer, and Modern. In Standard, it was played as a sideboard card that mid-range and control decks could bring in against aggro decks, and it saw main deck play in Yorion Ultimatum decks. In Pioneer, it's played in Devotion to Green, and in Modern, it's played in Utopia Gruul, a red-green Ponza deck. While it has definitely slowed down since rotating out of Standard, it is still gaining points, and it's possible that it will do enough to stay on this list. At number 8, it is Questing Beast, another card that didn't exist back in 2018 since it was printed in 2019's Throne of Eldraine. Questing Beast has a famously loaded text box, and Vigilance is somewhere in there, along with Death Touch, Haste, and a whole bunch of other stuff. You can't just sit back and let it hit you and try to race, because Vigilance means this thing will still be able to block. Because of Haste, it often has a good attack the turn it comes down, and then Death Touch means that if you want to kill it, you're going to have to use a card or 2. This is all augmented by the good stats, the fact it can't be blocked by small creatures, and the fact that it lets you go after planeswalkers when you do combat damage to an opponent. Questing Beast has already been played in multiple formats, and it looks like that's going to continue, so I imagine it will keep moving up this list in the future. At number 7, it is Sylvan Advocate, which has fallen from the number 4 slot it occupied back in 2018. This 2-mana 2/3 comes with Vigilance, and once you have enough lands around, it becomes a 4/5. The Advocate would likely have seen play in most Standard formats, but it got an extra boost out of the fact that with it being a 4/5, it could survive one of the main board sweepers in the format, Languish. There weren't any other 2-drop creatures who could make such a claim. It also didn't hurt that it could also make your creature lands bigger, since there were some of those in the format. The efficiency of the Advocate virtually made it into a staple for green decks, and this was true in control, mid-range, and aggro builds. Control decks could play it alongside their Languishes without being worried they would lose their Advocate, and the other decks could play it purely based on its efficiency. Just to name a few of the decks it was featured in, there was Collected Company, Green-White Tokens, Sultai Control, Gruul Ramp, and Golgari Constrictor. The Advocate hasn't gained a single point since the last list. It just isn't strong enough for formats that aren't standard, so it's pretty inevitable that it will fall off of this list. At number 6, it's Mantis Rider, which held on to the number 6 slot that it also occupied back in 2018. The Rider is a 3-mana 3/3 with 3 keyword abilities. In addition to Vigilance, it also has Flying and Haste. This combination of keywords means that the Rider gives you an evasive creature that puts your opponent on a quick clock because it can attack right away, while it can also hang back and protect you if necessary. While in Standard, it was played in Jeskai midrange and aggro decks, but it's found the most success in Modern, where it's played in Human Tribal. Mantis Rider has seen a ton of play there, since the deck has excellent mana and lots of human payoffs, so the Rider is a great fit. It's been very active in Modern over the last several years, so it's very likely to remain on this list. At number 5, it is Archangel Avason, which has fallen several slots from the number 2 spot it occupied last time. Avason is a 5-mana 4/4 with Flash, Flying, and Vigilance, and she makes your creatures indestructible until end of turn when she enters the battlefield. Avason's upside doesn't even end there, believe it or not. She can also transform into a larger creature who does 3 damage to the whole board. The design here is really cool because you don't have complete control over when that happens, and your opponent could potentially take advantage of it, but you're still kind of coming out ahead since you have a huge flyer that will survive the effect no matter what, while also doing 3 to your opponent. She was basically a staple in white decks and Standard, regardless of whether the deck was a control or aggro deck. All of her abilities make it pretty easy to get 2 or even 3-for-1s out of her, and that is really devastating. While almost all of Avason's points have come in Standard, she also has a lone Modern point from 2018 where she appeared in a Martyr Life Gain deck, and more recently she's seen some play in Pioneer, where she's played in White Weenie and Spirit aggro. She is going to gain more points, but she isn't doing it very quickly, so she is likely to continue to slip down this list as cards like Mantis Rider and Questing Beast continue to gain points at a much higher rate. At number 4, it is Heart of Qiran, which moved up 1 slot after occupying the number 5 spot on the 2018 list. The Heart was still in Standard at the time of the 2018 list, and it gained way more points in the format before it rotated, before also seeing some more modest play in Pioneer. This vehicle comes with a relatively high crew cost of 3, and if that was the only way to crew it, it wouldn't be that great, even as a 4/4 Flying and Vigilance. The key thing about the Heart is that you can also crew it by removing a loyalty counter from a Planeswalker, and you don't even have to forfeit using your Planeswalker's abilities that turn. You can do both. Basically, this meant you could crew it for free in the right deck, and the downside was still a pretty efficient aerial beater. It was at its best in decks that had various artifact synergies, like the various vehicle decks in Black-Red aggro. It often felt like a staple in the format, for example, appearing in 7 of the top 8 decks at Pro Tour Aether Revolt. It's also gained some points in Pioneer Devotion to Green decks, a deck that has a lot of Planeswalkers in it, including Karn the Great Creator, who can grab it out of the sideboard. While it has gained tons of points since the 2018 video, very few of them have come over the last 2 years, and that may not bode well for the card's future on the list, although with its massive score, it will probably be a while before it falls off of it entirely. At number 3, it is Celestial Colonnade, which held on to its number 3 slot. The Colonnade is a great creature land. Like the others from Worldwake, it provides you with 2 colors of mana while also being capable of becoming a creature. In this case, it becomes a 4/4 with both Flying and Vigilance, and that's definitely the kind of creature that can close out a game. Having a land that can function as a win condition is always great. Giving the land Vigilance also means that you can still use the mana for other purposes, too. It saw significant play in Standard decks like Blue-White Control and Cobblade, and it's also gained some points in Extended and Legacy, but it has really been a fixture in modern Blue-White and Jeskai Control decks. One of the great things about it in that type of deck is that it dodges your board sweepers, so you can take out the opponent's board and still have a 4/4 flyer to close out the game. It is going to keep on gaining points in Modern going forward, and it isn't that many points behind the number 2 card on the list, which is Nisha, who shakes the world, who didn't even exist back in 2018. If you've been playing Magic in the last few years, you've undoubtedly seen a lot of this Nisha, who has been heavily played in Standard, Pioneer, and Historic. She makes it on this list as a result of her +1, which puts 3 counters on the land and untaps it while giving it both Vigilance and Haste. Her static ability is also incredibly powerful, as it allows you to double the amount of mana your forests produce. Her ability to multiply mana combined with her land animation effect is pretty nasty. Like with Celestial Colonnade, because the lands have Vigilance, you can actually attack with them and use them to produce mana in the same turn, and it will be 2 mana, provided you animated a forest. Her ultimate then makes sure you have all the mana ever, at which point it's hard to lose, especially because all of your lands that have become creatures get indestructible, and really, if you just stick Nisha in play at all and untap, it's really hard to lose. She's been a key card in Standard, Pioneer, and Historic ramp decks where she can power out huge Hydroid Crassuses and Flying Shark tokens. These days, she's also played in Pioneer Devotion to Green decks, and that seems to be the format where she will continue to gain the most points. However, it's unlikely she will ever catch the number 1 card on this list, which is Batterskull, which was also number 1 on the 2018 list. Batterskull is a great piece of equipment because it comes with Living Weapon. That means it's basically a 5-mana 4/4 with Vigilance and Lifelink that can return to your hand when you need it to, and that you can move on to other creatures for stats boosts. Now, that on its own isn't crazy, but Lifelink and Vigilance do pair well together and are highly effective at countering aggressive decks. That said, the skull itself probably wouldn't be so good if it weren't for its frequent running mate, Stoneforge Mystic. Those 2 cards have teamed up to gain lots of points in Standard, Modern, Legacy, and Vintage. The Mystic can search up Batterskull and then cheat it into play. That's a powerful enough play that ultimately the Mystic got banned out of Standard and Extended, and it was even preemptively banned when Modern was created as a format in 2011. Despite these bans, Batterskull still gains some significant points in both Modern and Standard, but mostly as a sideboard card against aggressive decks. The Mystic was never banned in Legacy, and that's why it's amassed so many points there. In 2019, the Mystic also got unbanned in Modern, leading to a massive resurgence for Batterskull in the format. Batterskull is still putting up points at a pretty impressive clip in Legacy and Modern, and that's probably not changing anytime soon, so I think if we revisit this list in 4 more years, it's likely that this is still at number 1. So, those are the Vigilance cards that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. If you're in need of some of these cards, check out the description, where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each of them. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you stay aware of future videos, including many more MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to make sure you're caught up on past MTG Top 10s, including many more that look at keyword abilities and mechanics, you'll see a playlist on your screen shortly. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting the channel, you can do that on Patreon or by joining the channel as a member. Thanks for watching.